Hi, my name is Hemant. I'm going to speak about master data management. This is a topic close to a lot of people's heart, mostly because it's bleeding, because most of the time master data management projects don't get it right. Just a little bit about myself. I've been working in the field of information management, data, so on and such for the last about 18 years now. Mostly in systems integrator or consulting organizations, and predominantly in the financial services area. Being a data architect, started my life as a data designer, data architect, which then changed into something called as information architecture. I'm finding that the rigor, the discipline, the basic concepts are pretty much the same. They keep coming back in newer and newer concepts. Master data management, business intelligence, enterprise architecture. For the last 2 years now, working with a company called Enterprise Blueprints, heading their information architecture practice and concentrating purely on architecture. That's me. Master data management. So what I wanted to do was to start with what exactly I mean by master data, and then obviously what is the management of that master data. So once we have baseline that, then we start looking at what is involved in actually running a project or delivering MDM capability in an organization. Now, the MDM capability in an organization basically is two things. First is to institute it, as in to get it into the building, and second is then to, on an ongoing basis, manage it. What I'm going to today talk about, and this is simply because this is a 25-minute talk, is just the first part, which is to actually institute it, as in to just have that implemented for the first time, assuming that there is no discipline available in the organization, or there is some that we just need to enhance. But before that, just wanted to look at what exactly is master data. So these are various different data constructs, so to speak, and what I want to do is just concentrate on the ones in the middle. And what I have found is that I have worked on operational as well as analytical MDM, and there is a lot of confusion about what is and isn't master data. So is reference data master data or not? Is transaction activity data, which is your MIS, is that master data or not? So if it is not master data, then what is analytical MDM? So there are a lot of these concepts that keep floating. Obviously the vendors haven't helped because they keep coming up with newer and newer concepts in this MDM arena. So it becomes very difficult for us to just concentrate our scope to some specific aspects, because obviously this is a discipline and requires a specific set of capabilities, technologies and methodologies. So reference data, codes, description. So this is basically things like industry codes or list of values, yes, no, not applicable, or male, female and stuff like that. Typically things that are used in drop-downs whenever you have to choose on a form some sort of a drop-down. So those are reference data sort of sets. Then you have got enterprise structure data, which are hierarchies. So a way in which a particular master data sort of stacks. So how are offices collected into areas or into regions or into geographies and so on and such. Then you've got the transaction structure data. This is what is typically called as master data. So these are, as Chris said earlier, the nouns of the enterprise. So this is customer or this is product. So this is typically the type of data that is used to describe what you do. So I serve customers, or I sell, say, automobiles to high net worth individuals, something like that. So these are the nouns that basically help you describe the operations of the organization. That is what I define as master data. It's a customer, it's a product, it's a chart of accounts, and then depending upon which noun you are using, different types of business processes sort of kick in. And that is probably one of the important things that we need to think about in terms of management of master data. So I think most of us know that master data management is obviously about technology, and there are aspects of technology, but it is also about business process management. Any data management endeavor, any data management discipline is about business change as much as about technology change. At a high level, it talks about these different areas. So you have a data lifecycle where the data gets created, read, updated, archived, or deleted. Then there is a harmonization aspect where you need to ensure that the data is clean, where you are trying to stack up different definitions of the data, and obviously there are many different definitions that are prevalent, and we just spoke about this earlier as well. Managing the quality of the data on an ongoing basis. So first of all, baselining the quality of the data, saying yes, our data is not a very good quality against these parameters, and then actually going ahead and managing that. There is business process management, which holds its hands very, very closely with the data lifecycle, because it's in those business processes that the data does get created or read or updated. And then you obviously have the governance of the data, information governance and data governance, called out separately because these are different endeavors. Because information governance is not just about looking at the definitions of the data, but also about how are those definitions deployed in a particular business process. So how is it a sales organization consider a customer operation differently to a support organization or a service organization within the same enterprise? And then obviously the IT change management that goes with it. This is the main slide. This is probably the slide I'm going to spend most of my time on. How long have I got the students?
Probably another 10, 15 minutes. Let's say 10 and a half questions.
So what you will see is that this is typically a sort of a delivery-oriented view towards master data management. It's waterfall in the main because not out of any particular liking for waterfall, and you can have sort of iterative approaches to these as well. But what is to be noted is that when you're actually doing master data management, it is important to pause and think about what is it that you would like to achieve. Formulate what master data management does really mean for your organization. And yes, there are lots and lots of big things that you can do so far as master data management is concerned, and you can aim to do that on day one, but you probably will set yourself up for failure. So what you need to do is to probably begin with the right level of ambition. If it is a large organization, even more important to set the right level of ambition. In order for you to set that ambition, you first need to do a baseline of where you are. So a lot of this obviously is a baselining of what is your existing master data management capability. Some sort of an assessment exercise about various different disciplines that I talked about earlier in master data management. Just start asking some basic questions about where you stand in each and every one of those MDM disciplines. Then create the business case. Now, what I've been finding in master data management is, until about 3-4 years ago, there were not many what I call horizontal data projects, which basically meant that data was always considered to be a part of a large transformation initiative. So a finance transformation program of which data is an important part, a customer operations or a customer advocacy exercise of which data is a very important part. So it always was a fairly large organizational initiative of which data was considered a part. But things are changing in the last 2 years. We are now finding we are working with organizations where they have realized that yes, they need to transform, but they cannot devolve the data problem to specific transformation initiatives. Then what happens is that these initiatives don't hang together currently. So what they have started doing is creating these what I call horizontal data initiatives, which actually span the enterprise and start looking at what needs to be done across the enterprise to solve it. It's not happening all together in all the projects, but at least I'm seeing that happening more and more now. So we're working with a retail organization where they have formulated 5 large vital programs for transformation. One of them is we need to make the most of our data. So yes, most of those are customer facing or business process facing, but they have also decided to have a pan organization sort of a data management initiative or a data improvement initiative. So you set the level of ambition, you naturally need to look at what the topology of your organization is. So are you going to try and solve this problem at a business unit level? Are you going to solve it within a particular region of a business unit? Or are you really going to aim for the entire enterprise, which is a collection of all of your business units put together? Are you going to solve the master data problem for a particular data domain, which is say customer? Or are you going to start establishing some high-level tips, tricks, techniques for all of your data domains, including customer, product, etc., etc.? There are advantages and disadvantages of doing this. It all is going to be driven by the appetite for change and the appetite for the implementation in the business. And hence it is important to have a baseline on what the level of ambition is. I have a finishing slide which talks about why MDM projects fail, and I believe this is one of the main reasons why they fail, because you don't know what you're set out to achieve, you don't know what your level of ambition is, and you most of the time fail against the ambition that you've set, or probably most of the time do not set. So that's the formulation bit, and these are the sort of artifacts that come out of it. So you typically have an MDM strategy document that comes out of that. Now usually a strategy document is about this is where we are, this is where we want to be, these are the gaps, this is the roadmap against it. And that is a good way to have a strategy document. Most of the times, this strategy document starts by saying, we don't have Cyprian, we need to have IBM Cyprian, Informatica Cyprian, let's buy Cyprian. So it always starts about or talks about the technology capabilities that an organization doesn't have and what we need to do actually to buy it. What you will see over here is that the technology tool set where you need to actually decide on what technology comes much later into the project definition. In terms of the project definition bit, you obviously begin by confirming the project scope, which comes from your topology, as in where would you like to actually implement this master data management project. You define the delivery team and the methodology, and this is where you start looking at whether you want to do it in a prototype, iterate, apply, and then re-prototype sort of a fashion, or you want to do it top-down in a waterfall fashion, and so on and so forth. You obviously start identifying key risks. So this is standard project management 101, and you come up with a project initiation document, differently called project charters, or a project formulation document, different things. But this is basically where you have said, I'm going to deliver an MDM project, this is the scope, these are the business benefits that I'm aiming for, these are my risks, as I see them now, obviously more and more risks will be presented, and this is the way in which I will deliver this project. So simple project management 101. And then you actually start getting into the designing and the implementation bit. And this is where you probably can start doing this in an iterative fashion or in a waterfall fashion like what I've shown over here. It begins with the identification of golden sources. Now, this could be a simple exercise or this could be a very, very complex exercise, depending upon how complex your business setup is. So if you have got multi-locational, multi-geography, multi-product setup, then to actually arrive at an organization-wide definition of customer or definition of product is going to be extremely difficult. So then you start setting the level of ambition. Again, you start cutting the problem down into manageable chunks. And then you start looking at whether these 3 or 4 attributes out of a possible 25 attributes that define a customer can be golden sourced from a particular source application. So that's how you start identifying the golden sources. You baseline your data quality by doing a first pass data profiling. This essentially tells you the size of the problem, how big the problem is in terms of managing this master data. Not all of this master data quality issues can be solved by cleansing it once. You will have to establish either a data quality organization called a data quality framework, or you will have to do probably something more radical, which is a business process exercise, because most of the data quality problems are business process problems. So what happens is all of your data quality issues, you can actually pin them down to specific handoff issues in your, in your business processes, or a way in which a particular front-end user is going to input the data and so on and so forth. You can always pin it downward a business process problem. Then you start looking at the MDM domains. So that by that I mean customer or chart of accounts or product and so on and so forth. And you start looking at modeling. And as Chris said, modeling is in itself a fairly large vocation, and you could probably spend a lot of time in actually doing the modeling. In my mind, modeling is 3 things in the main. First, of course, is how do these attributes or entities, as in master data entities, relate to each other and hang together. Second is, what is the exact definition in a clear, consistent, concise fashion understood across the business for each and every one of the attributes. So if it is a customer name, what exactly is a customer name as understood by everyone, right? Customer name is the name as I see it in the agreement which I have written with the customer. Customer name is something that the salesperson addresses the customer by in his first outgoing communication. These are different things, and you need to establish what out of this is the customer name. So just as an example. So clear-cut definition of the specific attributes, that's the second thing. And the third thing is the business process, which creates, reads, updates, archives, and deletes these customer data attributes. These 3 things in my mind come together to define the model, not one of them. And the moment you stop at one of them is when you have a substandard data model. Because the data model is the basis for you to identify your data quality problems and then again verify against. So if you stop doing or you stop short of doing all of these 3 things, then you are immediately setting yourself up for failure. So this is very important. Stop here, bring in the technical expertise and the quality guys that you would need to do the data modeling exercise properly, because that will reap rich benefit later on in the project. Defining the MDM architecture, this is again about what are technical terms, systems of entry and systems of record. Where is the master data getting entered? And what are these systems? Front-end systems, websites which are facing off to the customer, where the data gets entered, and then where is it getting recorded? And any combinations of these systems of entry and systems of record is going to mean a different sort of an architecture. It could be that 5 different systems of entry actually collect the customer data, for example, but it all gets collected into one single system of record, which means you need one sort of an integration topology. It could be that although the customer entity is 20 attributes, there are 5 different systems of record, each having 4 attributes, as an example, which is going to mean an even more complex integration topology. So depending upon how many systems of entry and what systems of record you have, you will start establishing what architecture constructs you need. Then you choose a tool set. Now, there is, just talking about the MDM tool set could be a session in its own right, but basically, you need to look at those disciplines, the MDM disciplines, and which of these disciplines you need a tool set support for. It's not necessary to buy a best of breed toolset capability for each of those disciplines. It could be simply that you need a business process modeling tool, which is nothing better than Visio to start with, depending upon the level of ambition that you set. But the thing is, you need to have some sort of a roadmap saying, these are the tools that I have in the business right now. Is there an enterprise architecture construct around reuse of these existing toolsets? If yes, which of the existing investments can I simply leverage? What are hence the gaps, and how can I then actually go about buying it? Then set up the data quality framework. This builds on the profiling that has been done and talks about how am I going to monitor the quality of the data? Who are my business process or data governance owners? How are they being made responsible and accountable for the quality of the data? How can I provide them with the dashboards that they need to actually keep a tab, and what kind of intervention capability they have into the change so that they can start making those data quality issues right? Then the standard implementation work, where you start building and testing and you start doing the migration. A lot of times what happens is that your master data system is present in a lot of applications already, from where you need to collect it into a golden source or a system of record, which probably might involve some sort of a migration, some way in which you need to change the integration points and so on and so forth. The important thing is about setting up the ownership and stewardship, and this is where a master data management project stops being a technology project and starts becoming a business project. This again is a fairly large topic, and there are people here who know a lot more about this than I do. But setting the right level of ownership, by level I mean level within the pecking order in the organization, for specific domains of master data is very, very important, because these people are going to be held accountable for the quality of data, and hence should have the executive authority to institute the change that is required to ensure that the data is of the highest possible quality. Stewardship is equally important. In my mind, data ownership and stewardship needs to go hand in hand. Stewards means the people who actually understand what would be the impact of a particular data quality or master data management attribute going wrong. And communication. Now, personally, I tossed up about whether I should put communicate across the piece or right at the very end. But I think it is important to have communication capsules and a communication strategy right from the start of the project. Begin by establishing why we are doing this project, why is it important that we need to get the MDM right, and to talk about this in business terms rather than in technical terms. It is important to not just communicate, but communicate in a language that people understand. So for example, I worked with a financial services organization where they never talked, so it was a master data management project, a customer MDM project, but they never talked about the MDM tenants and technologies. What they instead talked about was that we are in the middle of a merger, where they were in the middle of a merger, and what we want to do is, we want to deliver a common, concise and consistent experience to two sets of customers now, who are now going to come together. So there is a customer of this organization, there is a customer set of this organization. No longer should they experience, or should they have a different sales experience, a different service experience. And if we have to do that, we need to bring this customer base together, and we need to find a common way in which we can establish or define this customer. Now once you have that as sort of like a rallying point, then people start understanding this and they start putting these fairly technical concepts into real life. They start looking at what do these really mean in their day-to-day business, in their day-to-day operations. Various different ways in which you can do communication. Roadshows is something that works, but nowadays you really don't need face-to-face interactions because of the logistics involved. You can do it in a virtual fashion. You can have intranet sites, blogs, forums, and so on and so forth. Right at the very top, you have got governance. So outside of the data governance side, you also need to have governance in terms of the project or program management governance, obviously, where you are floating on the risks. You are also tying up with other projects, large projects, organization-wide projects that are happening. And you are also looking at how are you hooking up to the enterprise architecture tenets that have been set up for management. This is at a high level, what typically goes into delivering a master data management project. It is going to end by what could go wrong. Now this is again back to that particular slide, the previous slide, where some of those things are not done properly. And what I've typically seen is that these are the things that sort of stand out of all of those activities that I mentioned earlier. So you do a wrong sort of a benchmarking, a wrong maturity assessment, where you think you are more mature than you are. Or in most cases what happens is, when we do maturity assessment and we go and ask about, say, integration architecture, they begin by saying we're 0. Funnily enough, so they don't want to say that they are 1 or a 2. So there is always an improper sort of a benchmarking exercise, which obviously starts you off on the wrong foot in the first place. Then the business case is unclear, and this is again very, very important. So it is very difficult to write a business case. So theory says business case is 2 things. It's a benefit case, and second is it's a problem case. Which problems am I going to solve? What benefit am I going to deliver? But to actually attach a monetary value to both of these, and to actually then attach a monetary value to the amount of money I need to spend against this, and hence then have a business case which actually stands the test of time, is a very difficult exercise. So it is very important to write what the business case is, because as you are delivering the MTM project, inevitably you will have to go through some change. Something is going to get delayed, some particular vendor is not going to deliver, something or the other. And at that point in time, if you want to change the scope or you want to course correct, you will have to go back to your business case to look at which aspect of your business case is going to be significantly impacted because of the change that we need to now deliver. Poor architecture and strategy, again, this goes back to the benchmarking exercise. The architecture in my mind is critical because that sets the roadmap up. It sets the roadmap up from where you are now and what is it that you can realistically do through a set of transition steps. And unless and until you have those transition steps, it becomes very difficult for people to get moving on what the change is. So hence it is important to have good architecture. And we talked about this technology acquisition. Most of the organizations think if we buy an MDM tool, then our MDM problems will be solved. So a lot of time is spent on either doing a toolset evaluation or a technology acquisition as it is called, or to look at a gap analysis against an existing tool that they might have. The second bit is usually far more dangerous because the first bit you can solve. The second bit usually starts going into gap analysis against capabilities, and why would we not do that? Because at the end of the day we are looking at what capabilities that we are falling short of and so on and such. So you need to be very careful about the fact that you're not acquiring technology before anything else. Siloed MDM delivery, many times I have seen that they say we'll start with customer and we'll set up a template which will then apply to product. Or we'll start with a region, we'll set up a template and then we'll roll it out, or we'll do an organization pilot, which could be good if done properly. Which could be good if you have the right level of representation from all parts of the business when we run the pilot. So it is very important to note that we're not doing siloed MDM delivery. It is fine to, against the level of ambition, do it in parts, but we have to be careful that it is not siloed. And the last is about culture. It's about lack of business participation. So if you deliver an MDM project and it's been extremely successful and it's gone amazingly well. But if the user, the front office user who is inputting the data is still doing it in the wrong fashion, then it's all going to go waste. So hence it is important that there is a mindset change. There is a change in the way in which people, for example, sales start looking at when they are inputting the customer record for the first time, because typically it's the sales people who do that. They need to know that, yes, I don't need the email right now, I probably need only his telephone number, but I need to get the email right because my customer support person, the first thing he's going to do is send an email out whenever there is a customer call or support call. So I do need to collect the email, although I may not read it. So those kinds of things need to be brought in, and this again is where communication is going to help. So there is a beautiful looking slide that we typically use. This is about how we change the culture from suboptimal as is data culture to true data culture. As I said, it's about behavior, it's about values. Yes, it's about processes and practices. I personally don't have a lot of faith in what is called as best practice, because best practice usually is a paper exercise. Best practice is supposed to have come out of a lot of collected experience. The problem is that it turns into a best practice document which goes and sits in some architect's cupboard. So what is more important is that people start looking at applying this best practice in their day-to-day operations. And there is a mechanism available in the organization, usually in business change, which is actually doing this, which is working closely with the IT change, but is actually implementing whatever best practice has been created in the daily operations, going beyond just a process model or a process map or so on and such. This is fairly contagious, the fact that you do goal-oriented performance measurement. I have not yet seen whether this has been successful. I would be quite keen to know if you have seen it, where people have been incentivized on good usage of data, good data input, as well as good deployment of that particular high-quality data in their business processes. I have not seen incentive models or compensation models which have actually been driven out of good usage of data. But it is obviously one of the ways in which you can try to do it. This is basically it. Sorry, I've overstepped a bit, but any questions? Yeah.
On the reason for failure slide, I would suspect that again one of the main reasons for failure is it may come under a business case, but that either when let's say what the ambitions are at the start, either those are unrealistic or the project goes off and ignores them or loses sight of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as I said, that is something that you have to be cognizant of, especially for large organizations. And by large, I mean anything more than 500 people are for me large organizations. It is going to get complex. There would be course corrections to be done in any MDM project delivery. And at that point in time, you need to be clear about what is your business case, what have you set up for changes.
Any more questions?
Yeah, well, so when this goes well, and when you've seen it go well, how can you describe that value? Or what's the sort of benefit you've seen?
So what we did was, in the operational MDM project that we did a pain point analysis, where we talked about what is the monetary value in terms of person hours spent or customer dollars lost, for example, about a particular process gap which was due to a master data management. And you can actually see that in real monetary terms being changing. That's the first thing. The second thing, as I saw it, which does not have monetary value, is a better level of engagement from the same people. So this behavior that I talked about, where a salesperson is now more careful about getting the email right, although he does not need it in his own prospecting or sales process. I think that's a changed behavior, and that's also something that we see in a successful MDM project.
Okay, we've got time for one more question if there's one. One at the end there.
Talked initially about data definition. Have you seen benefit from this horizontal initiatives with industries defining, say, XML languages for their sector, so that they could do business to business, even enterprise application integration Has that got a lot of
So in some sectors it has worked, especially in the sectors where there is a lot of differentiation and there is a fairly large value chain, oil and gas or petroleum for example. So there has been a lot of all of this initiative about handing off of the data. In case of other organizations, financial services where I work, again this has worked where this data handoff needs to happen, for example with the regulatory bodies. So there are some specified templates in which the data needs to go back and forth and then that is XMLized, so to speak. So to that extent it works. In case of large organizations which have, for example, multi-locational sort of a setup, it becomes very important where even the internal transfer of the data needs to be consistent on both sides. So I keep saying this, that master data management is the currency of any business process within an organization. And the great thing about currency, the important thing about currency is what I consider 10 pounds should be considered 10 pounds by the person in front. And the only way to do that is to actually have a common definition of what 10 pounds really means. So yes, it does help. So far as the technology aspect is concerned, there are many multiple implementations and most of them have had a mixed sort of a response as to what is the platform, what is the XML tags that we need to send back and forth, how tight or loose it needs to be between the organizations or across the organizations.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to join in.